Everyone is surprised when a lion enters a hospital with a newborn, but you won't be able to speak when the nurse reveals the reality. As you watch, the neon sign outside St. Mary's Hospital in Phoenix, Arizona, is blurred by sheets of rain. A devoted nurse, Elia Carter, sitting at her station with cold coffee and more than 10 years of experience, her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but she persevered. It was just another hectic day. Night, or so she believed. Her focus was brought back to the lobby by the gentle chime of the automatic doors opening. Amelia looked in anticipation of a late. Rather than being a night visitor or an ambulance crew, her mug fell out of her hands and broke on the floor, and a huge golden lion was standing in the doorway. Time appeared to halt, and the busy hospital grew silent as the man lion, its fur wet from the rain, stood still as the storm roared behind it. Everyone rose, couldn't comprehend what they were witnessing. The lion wasn't hostile. It wasn't charging or roaring. It just stood there staring throughout the room, but Amelia's focus wasn't solely on the scene's utter impossibility in its strong jaws. The lion was carrying a tiny. Carefully wrapping the bundle, it moved closer, its claws tapping lightly over the tile floor. Amelia's eyes met Amber's, and she sensed Anne. There was an inexplicable pull that went beyond terror. As the lion approached, security officers paused, and whispers of disbelief ran through the crew. Doctors watched in startled silence, uncertain whether to step in. Amelia stepped forward, her heart racing for reasons she couldn't articulate, but something. The lion lowered the package to the floor with a gentle shove when it arrived in the middle of the lobby, telling her deep down to trust the creature. For a brief period, the only sound was the rain beating on the hospital's roof as it pushed the bundle towards Amelia with its nose and then sat back on its hunches. Windows. When Elia reached for the bundle, her hands were shaking, and she cautiously peeled back the moist towel to expose what was inside. Her breath stuck in her throat. The baby's lips were blue, its complexion was pale, its little chest rose and fell feebly, and its throat was a tiny infant, no more than a few days old. It gave forth a small, pathetic. Amelia's eyes were filled with sadness as she promptly evaluated the baby's condition and determined that the infant needed her training. Prompt medical intervention. She called for a pediatric team, and the lion remained motionless as her forceful, demanding voice broke the startled silence of the room. It appeared to comprehend the gravity of the situation as it sat quietly, its perceptive eyes observing Amelia's every action as though its work was now completed. Amelia glanced back at the lion as she gave the infant to a group of physicians and nurses who were hurrying in with an incubator, ensuring that the child was in good hands. There was something wrong with this whole scenario. Where had it come from? Why had it brought the baby here? And how could it have shown such exact care? And a voice jolted her out of her reverie, asking, "What's going on here?" It was the hospital's chief physician, Dr. Marcus Green, who had just arrived. Looked from Amelia to the lion, his face showing utter incredulity. Amelia gave a brief explanation of the circumstances, her voice shaking with passion as the lion brought the infant, set the youngster down, and realized something was amiss. Dr. Green's expression softened as he looked at the bundle that was now being whisked. He said, "I don't know," and Amelia turned back to the lion, who had not moved and was sitting in the water. They went to the neonatal unit, remained still, pouring from its fur as though it was waiting for someone or something. Security personnel were approaching, and suddenly their radios were ringing with frenzied chit-chat. With trembling hands, one of them brandished a tranquilizer gun. Amelia's voice was firm and uncompromising, demanding that no one touch the lion. "Saved a life tonight. We must show it the same consideration." Despite her hesitation, Dr. Green nodded, trusting her gut to figure this out before anybody else did. Could pretend. The lion turned, stood, and started to return to the door. It stopped briefly, looking over its shoulder as though to say goodbye, and then simply. It disappeared into the rain as quietly as it had arrived. Standing there with her heart pounding, Amelia had more questions than answers, and the mystery only grew more complex. "I discovered this in the baby's blanket when one of the nurses rushed over, holding a tiny thing in her palm. The nurse said she was out of breath as she handed the Object was a gold locket that was slightly tarnished but clearly etched. Amelia opened it with shaking hands and found a faded butt. The back of the locket featured an inscription that read, "Anna, protect him at all costs." It was clear and featured a mother holding a newborn baby, smiling lovingly. Amelia. Her thoughts were racing as she gazed at the locket, wondering who Anna was, if she was the baby's mother, what had happened to her, and how the lion was related to the storm. The wrath outside persisted, but Amelia sensed a change within herself. She wasn't aware of it at the time, but this night marked the start of something much more significant. Amelia stood just outside the neonatal section, which was more chaotic than anyone could have anticipated as nurses and physicians tried to stabilize the infant. With a mixture of hope and concern, Dr. Green watched through the glass as the baby's little chest rose and fell steadily with the help of the incubator's hum. His expression was a mix of relief and perplexity. He stated that the infant is stable at this time and is dehydrated and hypothermic, but there are no additional indications of any physical injuries. "It's a miracle," Amelia nodded, holding the locket in her fingers. "But who is Marcus and what?" "Amelia, whoever or whatever brought him here, saved his life." Umble knew it comprehended what had happened to him before he arrived at this lion, and before Dr. Green could react, a gentle chime reverberated over the security via intercom at the main entrance. The voice declared that there was a problem. When Ilya's heart fell, she went to Dr. Green, following her gut. The main lobby was no longer the serene, surreal image that it had been previously. The rain had subsided to a drizzle, but the infant said, "I'll handle this." Police officers, reporters, and a few citizens who had obviously heard the rumors were now crowded through the hospital entrance, and Ilya forced her way through them. When she noticed Carl, the security chief, talking to two cops, she inquired in a firm voice despite the turmoil, and Carl pointed to a man. He was a tall man with disheveled hair and a worn face, standing just outside the hospital doors. His clothing were saturated from the rain, and his eyes were flashing frantically. As though seeking someone, he appeared a few minutes ago with a photograph in his hand. Carl clarified that he was hunting for. His son says he is aware of the lion. Elia's pulse accelerated, and she moved forward, staring at the man. "I'm Nurse Carter," you said. "You're trying to find your kid." The man's hand shook when he held out the picture, which showed the same mother and child as in the locket. But this time his arm was protectively wrapped around the woman in the picture, and his face was full of pride. "My name is David," he continued, his voice quivering. "My wife, Anna, she died. Our car ran off the road during the storm 3 days ago, and I tried to get aid, but when I returned, the baby was gone, and I felt I was lost." He nodded, his eyes welling with tears, and Amelia's breath froze in her throat. "Your wife's name was Anna David," he whispered, drawing out a. "She said that the identical gold locket was hers, and that it was intended to keep him safe no matter what." Elia's hand gripped the locket tightly. "David, the baby is here and secure, but she hesitated about something else. We don't know how to explain why a lion brought him to us." David's face wavered between amazement and incredulity, and then a lion nodded before entering the hospital with your son wrapped in a blanket. It didn't harm anyone. It simply abandoned him. "Here, are you aware that Anna's request caused David's face to turn pale?" "Why do you mean that?" Amelia blinked. David inhaled nervously. "Anna developed. She raised a lion at a wildlife refuge as a girl named Solomon, and she always maintained he was unique, as if he could relate to her. She warned me before she died that Solomon would know if something happened to us. I initially assumed she was hallucinating, but then his voice faded. IIA put a reassuring hand on his shoulder as the tears fell down his cheeks. Her wish that the lion somehow brought your son here is the reason he is alive, David. We still don't know how, but he needs you back in the newborn ICU since he is still alive." David's eyes were watering as he stood near the incubator. Elias stood close by, allowing him space while he looked at his kid, but she was also observing the heartfelt reunion with a full heart when the baby stirred. He resembles her, with his small hand extending out as though sensing his father's presence. Thank you for saving him, David said in a heartfelt whisper. The Elia grinned subtly. It wasn't only us. Solomon was aware that David nodded while maintaining eye contact with his kid. There is nothing to repay you, and I'm not sure how to do it, Amelia stated. All that matters is that your wife's love and the lion's instinct led him here. Yet even as the moment brought Amelia relief and joy, pondered the night's mysteries. Where had the lion disappeared to? How could it have behaved so cleverly? And why did it seem like this wasn't the end of the narrative? When the first rays of sunlight appeared through the clouds the following morning, Amelia was pulled to the hospital entrance and went outside. She looked around the street in the hopes of catching a sight of the lion, but it was just beyond the hospital's perimeter. The air was peaceful and fresh after the rain. Solomon the lion stood tall and majestic in the parking lot, his mane glistening in the golden light, and his amber eyes met hers for the final time. IIA experienced a profound sensation of tranquility. As though the lion was bidding farewell with a rumble low, Solomon walked around, vanishing into the woods. Amelia stood there all morning for a long time. She gripped the icy air against her skin. Her heart was full of the locket she was holding. Thankfulness and amazement that the planet was still. Filled with inquiries, but one thing was, sometimes loyalty and love surpass comprehension, and on that, a lion had demonstrated it on a stormy night.